Every woman who killed in the UK, full list of life sentences. Welcome to UK Real Crime, where real crimes meet real justice. Today we open the cell doors to Britain's most dangerous women, killers driven by rage, greed, revenge, and pure malice. Once you know their stories, you'll never see them the same way again. Number 1. Kirsty Carless. Christmas night in Staffordshire, a time for warmth, family, and celebration, ended in a single act of violence that left 6 children without a father. Kirsty Carless, 33, had spent the evening drinking heavily, her blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal driving limit, and cocaine coursing through her system. Earlier that night, a friend showed her the Tinder profile of her ex-partner, 31-year-old Louis Price. What began as a flicker of jealousy quickly spiraled into deadly resolve. CCTV later revealed her movements. Carless took a kitchen knife from her home, called a taxi to Louis' address, and dialed his number 45 times without response. On the way, she phoned her mother, saying, "No matter what happens tomorrow, I love you." To the taxi driver, she promised, "I'll be back in a minute." When Louis answered the door, there were no words, no warning. She drove the blade 12 centimeters deep, piercing skin, rib, lung, and heart. Pathologists testified that the wound would have killed him in less than a minute. There were no defensive injuries. The attack was swift and final. Carless left without calling for help. Police later found Louis lying motionless, the only sound in the room, the faint blink of Christmas lights. At her arrest, she claimed diminished responsibility, blaming her intoxication. But the Stafford Crown Court jury rejected the defense. The prosecution emphasized the planning: a weapon brought from home, a targeted journey, and an immediate fatal strike. This was no sudden loss of control, the Crown argued. It was a decision carried through to the end. Louis' family described him as a well-loved member of the community and someone who would help anyone he could. The Crown Prosecution Service added, "Her actions have robbed 6 children of their father and his parents of their beloved son. The lessons from this tragedy are stark. Jealousy, combined with intoxication, is a volatile mix that can escalate without warning. Persistent, obsessive contact is not a gesture of care, it's a sign of danger. And when someone arms themselves before a confrontation, the risk of lethal violence is already high." Sentencing is scheduled for July 31, 2025, and is expected to keep Carless behind bars for decades. In court, she sat motionless as the verdict was delivered, eyes fixed on the floor, the weight of the jury's decision sealing her fate. His case serves as a chilling reminder: violence often hides behind familiar faces, and the line between love and harm can vanish in a single, irreversible moment. But jealousy-fueled rage isn't the only danger that can lurk inside a home. Our next case reveals how a mother's embrace can turn deadly. Number 2. Cara Alexander. On a cold December evening in East London, the festive calm masked a tragedy so deep it would fracture a family forever. Cara Alexander, 44, was a mother of 2 boys, Elijah, aged 2, and Marley, aged 5. On December 16, 2022, while in what Kingston Crown Court later called a cannabis-induced psychotic state, she committed what the judge described as the ultimate breach of maternal trust. For weeks, Alexander had been smoking potent skunk cannabis every night. 3 psychiatrists told the court that such heavy use can trigger acute psychosis, stripping away self-restraint and distorting reality. That night, in her altered state, she deliberately held each child underwater for up to 2 minutes. Afterwards, she dried their bodies, dressed them in clean pajamas, and laid them side by side in their bunk bed. She then barricaded the bedroom door with toys, what prosecutors called an attempt to seal the scene from discovery. It was their father, Selvin Thomas, who made the horrific find. The judge described his experience as the stuff of nightmares. Pathologists confirmed both boys had died from drowning or suffocation. Alexander initially claimed she had fallen asleep and awoke to find them dead. She offered to plead guilty to gross negligence manslaughter, but prosecutors rejected it. A jury convicted her of 2 counts of murder. The prosecution accepted the killings were not premeditated, but stressed they were intentional, the result of gross disinhibition caused by prolonged drug use. Aggravating factors included the extreme vulnerability of her victims and the devastating breach of trust between a mother and child. Mitigating factors were her prior good character, and the significant mental impairment brought on by psychosis. On April 11, 2025, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years and 252 days. Delivering the sentence, the judge warned the heavy use of skunk or other hyper-strong strains of cannabis can plunge people into a mental health crisis in which they may harm themselves or others. If any drug user does not know that, it's about time they did. This case leaves lessons as raw as they are urgent. Substance abuse, especially with highly potent cannabis, can erode rational thought until irreversible harm is done. Ignoring earlier mental health crises can leave everyone at risk, and in volatile states, children, defenseless and trusting, are the most vulnerable of all. Notices come to the office at once. As the verdict was read, Alexandra stood motionless, her pale face fixed downward, as if the weight of what she had done had only just landed. This was not danger from outside the home, this was danger born inside it, from the very person meant to protect. If drug-induced psychosis can destroy a family, our next case reveals how revenge within a broken home can claim the most innocent life. Number 3. Shilyrand Charigwati. In a quiet Hertfordshire home, a father's worst nightmare became reality, not from a stranger's hand, but from the very person his daughter should have trusted most. Shilyrand Charigwati, 30. Once described by friends as a caring and attentive mother, stood in the dock in 2025, convicted of murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Rosalind. The killing took place on April 14, 2024, just months after Charigwati had lost custody to her ex-partner, Washington, who had been raising the child. The jury at Luton Crown Court heard how the loss of custody ignited what the judge, Mrs. Justice Williams, called a huge amount of bitterness towards Washington. This deep resentment, she concluded, fueled an act of spousal revenge so cruel that it robbed a toddler of her life. On that spring day, during what the defense claimed was a routine nappy change, Charigwati placed a plastic bag over Rosalind's head and suffocated her. There were no signs of a struggle. The victim was too young to resist. The judge described the act as a shocking abuse of trust and the deliberate targeting of someone utterly defenseless. Psychiatrists assessed Charigwati and diagnosed her with mild to moderate depressive illness. She claimed to have no recollection of the killing. While the court accepted that her illness was genuine, it found it insufficient to lessen her culpability. A guilty plea to manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility was rejected. The jury convicted her of murder. Throughout the trial, she showed little visible emotion. When Washington delivered his victim impact statement, describing Rosalind as his little best friend, the light of my life, and the unbearable silence that followed her absence, Charigwati sat motionless. As the judge read her sentence, life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years, she raised her eyebrows slightly, but said nothing. Mrs. Justice Williams pointed to clear aggravating factors: Rosalind's extreme vulnerability, the deliberate nature of the killing, and the revenge motive. Mitigating factors, her previous devotion as a mother and her mental illness, could not outweigh the enormity of the harm done. From this tragedy, the lessons are stark. Emotional turmoil left unchecked can spiral into irreversible violence. Strained co-parenting relationships must be addressed before hostility turns lethal. And mental health struggles, while real, must be managed proactively, especially when children are involved. As Charigwati left the dock, she cast a brief, unreadable glance toward Washington's family. The silence in the courtroom broke only with the sobs of those left behind. This case is a chilling reminder. Sometimes, the gravest danger to a child does not come from outside the home, but from within it, hidden behind the familiar mask of parental love. From parental betrayal, we now turn to a young woman whose desperate act would blur the line between victim and killer. And before, Martyna Ogonowska. On a cold October night in 2018, 2 young people sat in a parked car in Peterborough. Only one would leave alive, and the reasons would ignite years of legal battles and public debate. Martyna Ogonowska was just 18 when she met 23-year-old Filip Jaskedich through a mutual friend. Days later, she found herself in a terrifying confrontation inside his vehicle. According to her defense, Jaskedich began violently and sexually assaulting her, an ordeal that triggered deep trauma from when she had been raped at age 14. That earlier attack had left her with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and a history of self-harm. In the chaos, she produced a small kitchen knife and drove it into Jaskevich's chest. The blade pierced his heart. She fled without calling emergency services, The prosecution argued she had brought the knife with her, concealed in a bag or under her dress, and acted in anger rather than in self-defense. The defense maintained it was a desperate act to stop an assault. At Cambridge Crown Court, the judge acknowledged that Jaskowicz had undoubtedly touched you sexually and was violent to you shortly before he was killed, but rejected claims of self-defense or diminished responsibility. He concluded Ogonowska deliberately stabbed him, intending to cause at the very least really serious bodily harm. Ogonowska's mental health history was central to the case. She had suffered severe PTSD, postnatal depression at 16, and difficulties adjusting to life in the UK after moving from Poland. Her supporters argued that these vulnerabilities, combined with the sexual assault, should have been given greater weight. Advocacy group Justice for Women called her a double victim of a misogynist justice system, accusing prosecutors of relying on discredited rape myths. The jury convicted her of murder, and she received a life sentence with a 17-year minimum term. Appeals against both conviction and sentence were launched. The Court of Appeal rejected the conviction challenge in 2023 and upheld the sentence in May 2025, ruling it was not manifestly excessive. From this case, there are sobering lessons. First, carrying weapons, even for self-protection, can be used as evidence of intent in court. Second, survivors of sexual violence face immense legal scrutiny when they fight back. Third, mental health struggles, if untreated, can magnify danger in volatile situations. Ogonowska's case remains a flashpoint for campaigners seeking reform, particularly around how the justice system treats women with histories of abuse as she begins the long years of her sentence. The unanswered questions about justice, intent, and survival continue to echo far beyond the courtroom. In the end, this tragedy forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. In the space between victimhood and criminality, the law often draws lines that many believe are far from clear. But not all killings come from the shadows of trauma. Sometimes, a single moment of rage is enough to destroy a life. Number 5. Hope, Rowe. The birthday cake had just been cut, the knife still warm from slicing through icing, but within hours, it would be buried in someone's chest. But in the early hours of September 15, 2024, joy turned to horror. Hope Rowe, 32, had been a guest at a teenager's birthday party in Stepney Green, East London. Among the attendees was 31-year-old Charlotte Lawler, a devoted mother described by friends as someone who could light up a room. At some point that evening, an unexplained argument broke out between the two women, a verbal disagreement that seemed minor to onlookers but ignited something far darker within Rowe. Judge Freya Newbery later described how Rowe's moderate to severe personality disorder magnified her sense of insult, fueling a furious rage that tipped into vengeance. Instead of leaving the party, Rowe took the knife that had just cut the birthday cake, concealed it in her handbag, and lay in wait at the bottom of the stairs. When Charlotte emerged, Rowe stepped forward and drove the blade into her chest with fatal precision. The force of the blow pierced her heart. Witnesses say Rowe attempted a second strike as Charlotte collapsed, her young son Riley, just 12 years old, watching in shock. Charlotte died almost instantly. Phone data and an accidental voicemail left by Rowe's partner, Lee Holder, unraveled her version of events. Despite claiming it was a momentary loss of control, the prosecution proved she acted in anger and out of revenge, fully aware of the consequences. At Inner London Crown Court in June 2025, Rowe sat in the dock without remorse. The jury convicted her of murder and possessing a blade in a public place. On July 9, Judge Newbery handed down a life sentence with a minimum of 23 years, calling it a shocking act of calculated, callous cruelty. Charlotte's family left court in grief and fury. Her mother, Tammy, called the sentence a joke, insisting life should mean life. That is why we have so much knife crime, she told reporters. The law needs to change. Charlotte's sister Harley said no sentence could repair the damage, while her grandmother Sharon described the call about Charlotte's death as the moment her world ended. From this tragedy, 3 urgent lessons emerge. First, emotional escalation in social settings can be deadly. Walking away is sometimes the most powerful act. Second, concealed weapons turn conflicts into killings. Third, untreated personality disorders and unmanaged rage can destroy lives in seconds. The case of Hope Rowe is a stark reminder that violence rarely erupts without warning. It brews in pride, resentment, and the refusal to let an insult go. And when it does, the cost is irreversible. If a knife in the heat of an argument can end one life, our next case shows how cold, calculated deceit can erase two. Number 6. Virginia McCullough. For 4 years, she slept under the same roof as her dead parents, their bodies hidden in her home, their pensions paying for her life. Virginia McCullough, 31 at the time, was the youngest daughter of John and Lois McCullough, both in their early 70s. Her parents were in declining health and relied heavily on her for care. Outwardly, she was their helper. In reality, she was draining their finances, forging documents, and running up nearly £60,000 sterling, 0 pence, in debt under their names. By March 2019, McCullough began planning their murders. She stockpiled prescription drugs, purchased a knife, and even bought implements to crush medication. In June that year, her father John was given a fatal dose of medication hidden in an alcoholic drink. When her mother Lois survived the same poisoning attempt, McCullough attacked her in bed, bludgeoning her with a hammer and stabbing her repeatedly with a kitchen knife. She later described the blows with a chilling lack of emotion, likening the sound to someone badly playing the xylophone. Rather than alert authorities, she concealed the bodies in elaborate hiding places within the home. John was placed in a makeshift tomb of breeze blocks in his study. Lois's remains were wrapped in a sleeping bag and stuffed inside an upstairs wardrobe. For 4 years, McCullough maintained the facade, living rent-free, spending their pensions, and gambling away over £21,000 sterling, 0 pence, online. The truth unraveled in 2023 when police, acting on new information, entered the home. What they found shocked even veteran detectives. McCullough confessed quickly, telling officers she had known this day would kind of come eventually. At Chelmsford Crown Court, she pleaded guilty to both murders. Mr. Justice Johnson called her actions a gross violation of the trust that should exist between parents and their children, noting the substantial degree of premeditation and economic abuse that preceded the killings. On October 11, 2024, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 36 years. Her siblings, speaking under anonymity, described the ordeal as a living nightmare from which I will never wake up. Her uncle, Richard Butcher, said the details had undermined my faith in humanity, labeling his niece very dangerous. This case underscores critical warnings. Financial control in a caregiving relationship can mask deeper exploitation. Sudden changes in a dependent's financial situation warrant urgent review, and long-term isolation of vulnerable elders increases their risk of silent abuse. The McCullough murders stand as a stark reminder. Betrayal from within a family cuts deeper than any stranger's crime. It asks an unsettling question: how well do we really know the people closest to us? Betrayal of parents is shocking, but what if the one you trust to save lives is quietly taking them? Number 7. Lucy Letby. In the quiet corridors of a neonatal unit, where life begins fragile and full of hope, something unthinkable unfolded under the watch of a trusted nurse. Lucy Letby, once a 25-year-old neonatal nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital, was entrusted with the care of the smallest and most vulnerable patients, premature and critically ill newborns. Between June 2015 and June 2016, she betrayed that trust in ways prosecutors described as a cruel, calculated, and cynical campaign of child murder. Her victims were 7 infants, 5 boys and 2 girls, ranging from just hours old to 77 days, along with 8 others she tried to kill. Methods varied: injecting air into bloodstreams, overfeeding milk, poisoning with insulin, inflicting internal trauma, even removing breathing tubes. In one case, she targeted a 27-week premature baby weighing just 970 grams. The prosecution said she struck when colleagues were on breaks, often leaving her the only nurse present. Key evidence included handwritten notes found at her home, one reading, "I am evil, I did this," which the prosecution called a confession. The defense insisted these were the writings of a woman under extreme stress, not admissions of guilt. Still, her presence during each unexplained collapse and the patterns of harm convinced jurors. The investigation revealed troubling context. Warnings from consultants about Letby were initially ignored by hospital executives. Meanwhile, defense experts questioned the medical evidence, arguing natural causes could explain the deaths. The court, however, sided with the prosecution, finding her actions deliberate and sustained over a year. On August 21, 2023, Judge James Goss sentenced Letby to a whole life order, the harshest penalty in UK law, ensuring she will never be released. "You acted with deep malevolence bordering on sadism," he told her, noting the extreme vulnerability of her victims and her complete lack of remorse. In July 2024, following a retrial, she received an additional whole-life term for another attempted murder. Parents' statements in court painted the emotional devastation. "Everlasting grief, she will never hurt another child," said one mother. Some were visibly shaken when Letby quietly insisted, "I'm innocent." From this tragedy, urgent lessons emerge. Consistent medical anomalies demand immediate escalation beyond hospital management. Trust in professional credentials must be balanced with transparent oversight, and in cases involving the most vulnerable, institutional complacency can be deadly. The Letby case has already shifted UK law. Soon, convicted criminals may be compelled to attend their sentencing. It has also fueled debate on the reliability of circumstantial evidence in high-profile trials. Yet, beyond legal reforms, the story leaves a deeper, more haunting question. When safety is breached from within, how can trust ever be fully restored? Letby's cruelty targeted the most fragile newborns. But our next case reveals how violence can grow in someone barely old enough to drive. Number 8. Scarlett Jenkinson. In the calm of Culcheth Linear Park, Warrington, a friendship that once seemed a source of comfort hid a plan of extraordinary cruelty. Scarlett Jenkinson was just 15 when she befriended Brianna Gay, a 16-year-old transgender girl known for her bright personality and growing TikTok following. Brianna's mother welcomed the friendship, relieved that her daughter had someone she could trust. But behind closed doors, Jenkinson was keeping a handwritten kill list, drafting murder blueprints, and nursing an obsession with sadistic violence. On February 11, 2023, Jenkinson lured Brianna to the park under the guise of spending time together. She wasn't alone. Her co-defendant Eddie Ratcliffe came too. Concealed in Jenkinson's clothing was a hunting knife. What followed was, in the words of the judge, an exceptionally brutal attack. Brianna was stabbed 28 times in the head, neck, chest, and back, blows so forceful they fractured bone and pierced vital organs. Jenkinson later admitted she found the killing exciting, relishing the feeling of power it gave her. This was not an impulsive act. Weeks earlier, Jenkinson had tried to poison Brianna with an ibuprofen overdose, passing it off as a possible suicide attempt. Digital forensics uncovered chilling internet searches, how to kill someone, how to cut someone's throat, and discussions about taking body parts as trophies. One particularly disturbing remark singled out Brianna's pretty eyes as something to keep. Police dismantled their alibi within days. CCTV footage, witness statements, and the discovery of Jenkinson's murder notes left little room for doubt. In December 2023, a Manchester Crown Court jury convicted her of murder. Throughout the trial, Jenkinson remained composed and detached. On February 2, 2024, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years. The judge described her as the driving force behind the killing, highlighting her continued dangerousness, including a new kill list she created while in custody. For Brianna's family, no sentence could measure the loss. Her mother, Esther Gay, called Brianna amazing, unique, and joyful, devastated by the betrayal. Her father, Peter Spooner, told the court that no amount of time in prison will be enough for these monsters. Vigils across the UK drew thousands, and the case ignited debates about youth violence, hate crime, and online radicalization. The lessons here are stark. Friendship should not blind us to controlling or unsettling behavior. Online fascination with violence can fester into real-world harm if ignored, and explicit warning signs, such as written fantasies about killing, demand immediate intervention. Brianna's mother now campaigns for mindfulness training in schools and stricter controls on youth smartphone use. But her daughter's case remains a haunting reminder. Sometimes, the gravest danger wears the face of someone who calls you friend. Teenage cruelty is terrifying, but the next killer shows how greed and calculation can turn a friend into a murderer. Number 9. Jemma Mitchell. In the quiet streets of Wembley, northwest London, a friendship built on trust unraveled into one of the most disturbing murder cases in modern British history. Jemma Mitchell, 38, was highly educated, a former osteopath, and outwardly respectable. She maintained a close relationship with Mi Kun Chong, known to friends as Deborah, a 67-year-old Malaysian-born devout Christian who was generous, kind, and at times vulnerable. To outsiders, the pair seemed like friends, but beneath the surface, Mitchell was nursing a calculated plan, fueled by greed. The two had clashed over money, particularly a promise Mitchell claimed Chong had made to help fund repairs on her dilapidated £4 million (0 pence) family home. When Chong refused to give her the money, Mitchell decided to take it another way. On June 11, 2021, Mitchell visited Chong's home. Prosecutors alleged she murdered her there, possibly by striking her with a heavy blunt object. The fatal blow fractured Chong's skull. Mitchell then set about concealing her crime. She decapitated Chong, a chilling act detectives believe served no purpose other than to make identification harder, and wrapped the body in sheets. For the next 2 weeks, Mitchell kept Chong's remains hidden at her own home before transporting them over 200 miles to the Devon coast. There, she dumped the body in woodland near Salcombe, but kept the head hidden until it was eventually found nearby. The investigation that followed was relentless. CCTV tracked Mitchell's movements, arriving at Chong's home with an empty suitcase, leaving hours later dragging it heavily, and later driving to Devon in a hired car. Forensic evidence, including blood traces in her property, tied her to the killing. Police also uncovered a forged will that named Mitchell as the main beneficiary of Chong's estate, proof of a financial motive. At the Old Bailey, in October 2022, the court heard how Mitchell had acted with shocking cruelty and exceptional callousness. She showed no remorse, standing still as the jury found her guilty of murder. On October 28, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years. The judge called it a gross breach of trust for financial gain and noted that the decapitation added a grotesque and chilling dimension to the crime. While Chong's family kept their grief largely private, the case struck a national nerve, a reminder that betrayal can come from those closest to us. News outlets branded Mitchell one of the UK's most cold-blooded female killers. From this tragedy, the lessons are stark. When financial disputes intertwine with personal relationships, manipulation can turn deadly. Subtle, controlling behavior is often the first warning sign, and trust, once given blindly, can be exploited to catastrophic ends. As the prison doors closed behind her, Mitchell left more than a ruined friendship. She left a cautionary tale about greed, betrayal, and the disturbing lengths some will go for money, even when it means destroying the very person who once called them a friend. Financial gain drove Mitchell's betrayal, but our next case is even more disturbing. A mother killing her own children for freedom. Number 10, Louise Porton. She was meant to be their protector. Instead, she became their killer. The case of Louise Porton shattered the comforting image of motherhood, replacing it with one of calculation and chilling betrayal. Porton, 23, lived in Rugby, Warwickshire with her 2 daughters, Lexi Draper, aged 3, and Scarlett Vaughan, just 16 months old. Outwardly, she presented herself as a young single mother balancing childcare with a busy social life. But as prosecutors would later argue, she saw her children not as blessings, but as obstacles to her freedom. On January 15, 2018, Lexi was rushed to hospital after collapsing at home. Doctors fought to save her, but she was pronounced dead. Porton's demeanor raised quiet concern, calm, detached, and strangely preoccupied with her phone. Hospital staff noted her continued activity on dating apps, even while in the ward. Just 17 days later, tragedy struck again. Scarlett, too, collapsed under eerily similar circumstances. She died on February 1. At first, both deaths were treated as unexplained medical incidents, but suspicions deepened when post-mortem examinations found no natural cause, and police learned of troubling online searches on Porton's phone, including ways to kill children without leaving evidence. Detectives uncovered messages in which Porton complained her daughters were getting in the way of her social life. In the days between the deaths, she had exchanged flirtatious texts, arranged dates, and even posed for suggestive selfies. The Crown alleged that both girls had been deliberately suffocated, either by blocking their airways or applying manual pressure. The investigation also revealed that Porton had previously delayed taking Lexi to hospital during an earlier respiratory emergency, choosing instead to finish a photo editing task for a dating profile. This, prosecutors said, showed a disturbing pattern of neglect and selfish prioritization. At Birmingham Crown Court in August 2019, the jury convicted Porton of both murders. The judge told her, "There is no doubt you were responsible for their deaths. Your actions were calm, calculated, and deliberate. You squeezed the life out of your daughters." She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 32 years. The father of the girls described Lexi and Scarlett as amazing little girls, loving and beautiful, speaking of grief so deep there is no end to it. For investigators, the case was a stark reminder that evil can exist behind the most ordinary facades. From this tragedy, 3 warnings are clear. First, signs of emotional detachment or neglect in a caregiver should never be ignored. They can be precursors to deeper harm. Second, Unexplained medical incidents involving children must be treated as potential red flags, especially when repeated. Third, trust in parental instinct is not absolute. Vigilance from friends, family, and professionals is essential to safeguarding the vulnerable. The image of Louise Porton leaving court, expression blank, sentence sealed, endures as a haunting reminder. Sometimes the greatest threat to a child is the very person meant to keep them safe. Porton's coldness shocked Britain, but our next story is about someone even younger, whose violence claimed not one, but 2 lives. Number 11. Lorraine Thorpe. At just 15, Lorraine Thorpe etched her name into British criminal history as the UK's youngest female double murderer, a title born from events so violent that they continue to haunt Ipswich to this day. Thorpe's childhood was marked by instability, neglect, and immersion in a chaotic adult world. Living among a group of older acquaintances with criminal records, alcohol abuse, and constant volatility, she learned early that violence could settle disputes. That environment became the backdrop to 2 killings in August 2009 that shocked the nation. The first victim was Rosalind Hunt, 41, a member of Thorpe's social circle. Alongside her 41-year-old associate, Peter Clark, Thorpe subjected Hunt to a brutal assault. She was beaten and strangled until she died. The motive, prosecutors said, was rooted in a bitter dispute within their tight-knit but toxic group. Days later, Thorpe's father, Desmond Thorpe, became the second victim. When he threatened to go to the police about Hunt's death, Lorraine acted swiftly. In the early hours, she suffocated him in his flat. Clark was present, but prosecutors made clear that Lorraine's role was decisive. Police pieced together the timeline through witness statements, forensic evidence, and chilling admissions. Detectives were struck not only by the brutality, but by Thorpe's composure. There was no panic, no visible remorse. Prosecutor Jonathan Rees, QC, described her as fully aware of the consequences and acting out of loyalty to the violent world she inhabited. In 2010, Thorpe and Clark stood trial at Ipswich Crown Court. The jury heard harrowing details of both murders. The defense highlighted her youth, chaotic upbringing, and influence from older offenders. But the jury found her guilty on both counts. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 14 years, a rare penalty for someone her age. In October 2023, her parole bid was denied. The parole board concluded she remained a danger to the public, noting her lack of insight into her crimes. Media coverage reignited debate about how a teenager could become capable of such acts. From this case emerge stark lessons. Toxic social environments can accelerate moral collapse, especially in young people seeking belonging. Early intervention in violent or criminal peer groups is critical. Neglecting it allows cycles of harm to spiral. Never dismiss threats because of the offender's age. Capability for lethal violence can emerge far earlier than most expect. As she stood in the dock, hands clasped, eyes downcast, the court saw a figure both young and irreversibly marked by her choices. That still image, replayed in countless true crime UK documentaries, captures the enduring question her case poses: how much is environment and how much is choice? In the end, Lorraine Thorpe's story is a chilling reminder. Youth does not grant immunity from responsibility, nor does it diminish the weight of a life taken. From Britain's youngest double killer, we move to a woman whose lust for killing was so strong, she called it addictive. Number 12. Joanna Dennehy. With a smile for the camera, she was moments away from killing. That image would haunt detectives, marking Joanna Dennehy as one of Britain's most dangerous women. In March 2013, the 30-year-old carried out a series of killings now known as the Peterborough Ditch Murders. Over just 10 days, she murdered 3 men: Łukasz Slabosiewski, 31, her housemate John Chapman, 56, and local landlord Kevin Lee, 48. Each was found dumped in remote drainage ditches near Peterborough and Thorney, Cambridgeshire. The crimes revealed a disturbing pattern. Dennehy lured each victim without force, often with charm or promises, before attacking them with a knife. All suffered fatal stab wounds to the chest. Kevin Lee's body was discovered in a ditch, wearing a black sequined dress. A final act of humiliation. Dennehy later told psychiatrists she found murder moorish, describing the thrill as like eating chocolate. Police launched a nationwide manhunt. CCTV and phone records traced Dennehy's movements as she fled with accomplices Gary Stretch and Leslie Layton. Detectives feared she would kill again, a fear confirmed by her own words to a friend. She wanted to kill 9 men for fun. Her capture came in Hereford on April 4, 2013, after police tracked her through mobile data. Officers found her calm and smiling, joking with arresting officers. In custody, she showed no remorse, at one point telling psychiatrists, "I killed to see how it felt." At her Old Bailey sentencing in February 2014, Dennehy pleaded guilty to all 3 murders, as well as 2 attempted murders committed during her escape. The judge, Mr. Justice Spencer, described her as a cruel, calculating, selfish and manipulative serial killer, imposing a whole life order, the first ever for a woman in England. She will die in prison. During the hearing, Dennehy smirked, at times laughing with her co-defendant in the dock. The court heard she had no mental illness that impaired her responsibility, only a personality disorder marked by psychopathy and sadism. For the victims' families, the sentence brought little comfort. Kevin Lee's widow called his murder a grotesque act of pure evil. Police officers later admitted they had rarely encountered such a cold and unpredictable offender. From this case, 3 urgent lessons emerge. First, charm can be a mask. Manipulative individuals often present as friendly, even disarming, until it's too late. Second, fantasies of violence, even when shared as jokes, must be treated as serious warning signs. Third, those capable of killing for pleasure present a danger that no rehabilitation can erase. Prevention and early intervention are critical. The story of Joanna Dennehy is a stark reminder that danger does not always announce itself with rage. Sometimes it walks into your life, smiling, and leaves devastation in its wake. And while Dennehy's story closes our list, the truth is, more cases lurk in the shadows, cases you'll only hear here on UK Real Crime. Behind bars, their lives are sealed, but the darkness of their crimes still spills into the world beyond. Even more chilling cases are coming. Subscribe to UK Real Crime, hit the bell, and be first to witness what's next.